Welcome to Mindful Chatting, especially my private practice friends. And I want to start off by asking you a question. How many hours did you spend learning theories of psychotherapy in graduate school? Probably hundreds. How many hours did you spend learning how insurance actually works in graduate school? Probably close to zero. And yet, for many therapists, insurance determines how much you get paid, when you get paid, how you document, whether claims get denied or approved, and how profitable your practice becomes. And that's a pretty important topic to never really learn about in school. Now, before we dive in, though, I want to be clear about something. This episode isn't about convincing you to panel with insurance companies, and it isn't about convincing you to go private pay. Both models can absolutely work, and you should choose what works best for you. This episode is about making informed business decisions because I see too many clinicians signing contracts they don't fully understand and accepting reimbursement rates they've never calculated and wondering months later why their business feels financially stressful. And don't worry, I've been there too. And that's why I wanted to talk about this episode to learn from my mistakes to help guide clinicians in a different way. But we're going to change that, and we're going to do that together. Welcome to Mindful Chatting, a podcast where therapy meets real life. I'm Kristen, a therapist, business owner, and a lifelong student of what it means to fully show up in our relationships, in our work, and in our healing. Here, we unpack mental health concepts, explore mindfulness tools, and talk through the messy, beautiful, in-between moments that shape us. Whether you're a fellow clinician, a curious listener, or someone navigating your own growth, this space is for you. Let's chat. One of the biggest mindset shifts that I had when I was working with insurance companies was realizing that insurance companies aren't your employer. They're kind of like a business partner. You're entering into a contract with them, and that means you should understand the expectations that they have of you, your reimbursement that you're going to get from them, timelines, responsibilities, and your documentation requirements, just like you would with any other business agreement that you would have with somebody else. And the more that you understand the business side of insurance, the more confidently you can make decisions that align with the type of practice that you're trying to make for yourself. So I kind of created this kind of insurance strategy, and I'm going to go through the steps with you. So step one is know your numbers. And this is where I think most clinicians really get stuck. They know what insurance reimburses them, but they don't know what they actually keep. So let's walk through that, an example of this. Maybe an insurance company reimburses you $110 for that session for that client, which sounds great, but I want you to now subtract any billing fees if you do any third-party companies that help you with billing, rent, your EHR, your payroll if you have any taxes that you're saving, malpractice insurance that you have, any continuing education that you're going to take, and your office supplies. That $110 really isn't $110. And understanding your actual cost per session changes absolutely everything for you. So I want to talk about an example where I had to start pulling back. And to be honest, I didn't start doing this until probably year 1 or 2. If you've been following my podcast, you know that I worked full-time in a private practice with a psychiatrist as I built up my private practice on my own. So I was doing a lot of part-time work. And then when I felt like I had enough clients, I was able to switch over to move my private practice into a full-time landscape. But as I was doing that, my private practice at the time was kind of like this extra cash flow that I had. And I didn't recognize that I needed to pull back and go, what did I actually need to make? I just knew how much my rent was because I was kind of renting this little suite in a bigger suite of other people. And I knew how much that was going to cost. And I knew how many clients I needed to see that month in order to basically make my rent. And that's kind of like the number that I started off with, when I really should have looked at that my EHR system costs something every month, that I may need some supplies depending on what type of clients that I'm working with. Especially if you're working with kids, you're definitely going to need some supplies. You have to think about, your equipment, your laptop, your mic equipment, all of these little things. And even though they don't seem like a lot right now, they tend to add up. And I think what I would have liked to have done earlier, which I'd ended up doing a year or two later, is kind of just creating a basic spreadsheet of all of my overhead expenses that were tended to be reoccurring every month, and knowing my numbers to help me kind of make a better decision about how much to actually charge for each session. And this is where it kind of helped me realize that even though I felt like I was making over $100 an hour, which you need to start shifting that mindset away, because I tend we think about like, oh, I make over $100 an hour, which is way better than working for a private practice that maybe gets me a 60-40 split. But you have to think about all of the overhead that may be kind of skimping down, all of the time it takes for you to write your notes, to market your own practice, for referrals, all of these types of things that you need, that you may not be actually making $100 an hour. But this number helps you kind of define, is this insurance contract appropriate for the type of money that I'm going to need in order to manage my overhead? What type of self-pay, private pay clients am I going to have to charge that? This gives you an idea of what you're kind of shooting for when it comes to insurance contracts, or if you decide to do private pay.
For any clinicians tuning in, if insurance billing is the part of your practice that drains your soul, Headway will be your best friend. They get you credentialed, send you referrals, manage your billing, submit your claims, all the stuff none of us went to grad school for. It's free to join, and honestly, it's been a huge support for therapists who want to take insurance without drowning in the administration part. My link is in the show notes if you want to check it out.
Step 2 is know the contract that you're having. So before you're signing an insurance panel, you'll fill out an application where you kind of give them all of the information about you, location, what type of clients you're serving. And if they accept you, they're going to send you a contract. And before you start taking any clients, you have to sign this contract, and they'll usually give you a start date. But in this contract, I really want you to look at not just what your reimbursement rate is, but how often are your rates reviewed, which means you can start negotiating or thinking about, when do I know that they're going to evaluate my rate and maybe give me a different updated rate later. That contract may also kind of tell you how your claims are going to be appealed. And this was something that I didn't necessarily think about until I was 1 or 2 years in, of if claims get denied, what does that appeal process look like? And what are they going to need from you? And do you have the documentation and also the time to be able to appeal? It's also going to tell you any credentialing timeline. So some insurance companies make you re-credential over again after a period of time, or they may ask for an updated kind of directory. They may have you go through a third party in order for help for credentialing. That's just something that's going to be within your contract. You want to know if there's going to be any contracted changes. How are you going to be notified? And what does that process look like for you? And then you also want to look at, what are your documentation standards? I can tell you right now that most insurance companies do not have the same documentation standards across the board, but they do have kind of a baseline. And you want to know, is this insurance going to ask you for something different than a typical insurance might not necessarily ask you? And that kind of leads me into step 3. Step 3 is knowing your documentation. Documentation isn't just about your clinical care, it's also how you demonstrate medical necessity. And that is like a big word right now. You need to have good documentation that kind of tells you this clinical story. So I want you to ask yourself right now, if someone unfamiliar with this client reviewed my note, which insurance companies will ask and do so, would they understand why treatment kept continuing for them? That doesn't mean writing longer notes, it means writing purposeful notes. So you need to make sure, as we go through your documentation, that you need to have some type of verbiage that talks about the medical necessity of why that client was there, why you did that type of treatment, and why, if they need to continue with treatment. I think these are common documentation mistakes, and I'm going to kind of go through some of the things that I've seen within my supervisees and some of the companies that I do clinical supervision for. Copying and pasting without any updating details. You do not want your documentation to look the same throughout your individual clients. There may be some sentence stems or some things that can look very similar, especially if you're doing group work where they're kind of doing the same thing, but you want to make sure that each of your client's notes is tailored for what the client was going through. Goals never change. Your goals should be constantly updated with, and I kind of do this 6 months to a year timeline. I also want to see, are their goals never changing because they're not making progress, or because maybe the goal is a little too lofty, maybe unrealistic for the client at this point? Your notes not reflecting any progress. This is kind of interesting in that, yeah, I'm working with a client and yeah, they're in a particular space and maybe they're not making progress, but you need to document why. You need to document why treatment's not working, or what are you doing different, or what type of intervention did you do different because the treatment plan isn't working, or the typical treatment that you're doing for this client isn't working. You also want to kind of steer away from vague interventions. You want to maybe talk about what the intervention is and how it's tailored to that particular client or that particular session that you're looking for. And also, like I said, missing that medical necessity little nugget within notes. These are all avoidable with good systems and good templated systems that you can have, and something that you want to start now. So if you're ever audited, you already kind of have these really good foundational pieces within your documentation. Step 4 is knowing your leverage. One thing I wish more clinicians realize is you don't have to panel with every insurance company. Every panel should answer a business question for you. Does this insurance meet my ideal client? Does it meet my financial goals? Is it part of my workload? And does it meet my practice vision of where I'm going for? You are allowed to be selective with who you panel with.
Here's a quick note for my clinicians listening. If you're looking for a charting and practice management system that doesn't make you want to scream, well, guess what? I use TherapyNotes. It's clean, reliable, HIPAA compliant, and honestly saves me hours every week. You can try it with my link in the show notes.
When I first opened my practice, I thought the goal was to panel with every insurance company and as many as possible. And it felt like that kind of obvious path. And over time, I realized that the better question wasn't how many panels can I join? It was which partnerships actually support the practice that I'm trying to build. And that kind of shifted how I evaluated every business decision with insurance contracts going forward. This is something I often say within my podcasts and with supervisees and companies that I do clinical supervision with. You're not just a therapist, you're also a business owner. And that means asking questions like, is this sustainable? Does this align with the values of myself and my business? And does this support the long-term goal and vision that I have for my practice? And thinking like a CEO doesn't mean that you're less compassionate. It just helps ensure that you can continue serving the clients for years like you would like to do. So this week, I want to challenge you by choosing one insurance panel that you're on, if you have one, or even one that you're maybe considering, and just ask yourself, do I know what my reimbursement rate is? Do I know what my cost per session is? Have I actually read my contract? And does this partnership with this insurance company align with the practice that I'm building? If you can't answer those questions, that's your next step. If there's one thing I hope that you take away from today, it's this. Insurance isn't something to fear, it's something to understand. And the more informed you become, the more empowered your decisions become. And ultimately, that's what sustainable private practice is all about. It's not working harder, it's making wiser business decisions. I want to thank you for joining me. And as always, be gentle with your mind.
One more thing before you go, and this helps me personally, staying present and grounded, which we all need, especially when your brain wants to spiral into disconnection. Me too. It's Brain FM. It's musically designed to help ADHD brains, well, really anyone's brain, focus, relax, or sleep, and I use it almost daily. If you want to try it, I've dropped my link in the show notes. And if you're looking for planning tools or ADHD-friendly resources, I'll keep a list of my favorite links in every episode.